The arrival and the reckoning. They didn't come with war cries or apocalyptic fire. They came in silence. On a warm spring morning, the skies above Earth split open like a wound, and the stars bled ships. Massive, obsidian craft hovered over major cities, New York, London, Tokyo, Lagos, Delhi, blocking out the sun and the signal towers in one breath. Their arrival was not immediate chaos. It was stillness. The world paused to listen. And then the message came. Broadcasted through every screen, every speaker, every device with a circuit, an alien voice that spoke perfect, emotionless English. This is not conquest. This is assessment. You will not be exterminated. You will be observed. For a moment, hope flickered. Some believed it. Assessment, not war. But then the power grids died. Satellites went dark. The internet dissolved like smoke. Skies filled with scanning drones, and cities were sealed beneath glowing blue veils of energy that disrupted electronics and, eventually, minds. People screamed in metal elevators stuck between floors. Cars slammed into one another in dead intersections. Hospitals gasped and choked. The world cracked in half without a single bullet fired. From the orbiting flagship Judicator's eye, Commander Ziltar of the Galactic Assessment Corps watched with mild interest. Standing among a dozen fellow analysts inside a cold metallic command chamber, he stared down at the blue-green world below with the cold curiosity of a surgeon preparing to cut open a new species. "They are reacting predictably," he said. "Chaos within 72 Earth minutes. We begin Phase 2 at once." He did not expect resistance. These bipeds had no planetary unity. Their weapons were crude. Their minds were erratic. They polluted their own biosphere. They were, in his words, a volatile curiosity. But not a threat. In the smoldering hills outside Denver, Colorado, Reyna Cortez dug herself out of the ruins of a collapsed mountain comm station. Blood crusted her brow. Static hissed in her ears. Around her lay what remained of her special operations unit, some crushed, others burned. Her eyes were swollen but alive. And she was furious. The blast hadn't come from a weapon. It came from the sky, a gravitational pulse that folded the entire ridge in half like a paper sheet. They were meant to be neutralized. Not killed. Not yet. She didn't care what the voice had said. She called it what it was: invasion. Climbing over a broken metal strut, Reyna spat dust from her mouth, took a shaky breath, and retrieved the encrypted sat phone from a crushed crate. Dead. But she'd been trained for worse. She had her knife. She had her sidearm. And she had the fury of someone who'd watched her brothers and sisters die for nothing. "I don't know what you are," she muttered to the blue sky, "but you picked the wrong species." Back on the Judicator's eye, things were not going precisely as expected. Drones assigned to surveillance in remote zones had gone missing. In South America, a planetary scanner had been hijacked and rerouted. And somewhere in Eastern Europe, an entire outpost had ceased transmission without alarm or fallback. Commander Ziltar stood unmoving, long green fingers clasped behind his back. His eyes narrowed as data flickered across a floating console. "Primitive tactics," said sub-analyst Vren. "Random resistance from isolated cells. Irrelevant." But Ziltar wasn't so sure. "Begin cataloging anomalies," he ordered. "Mark patterns of unexpected coordination. I want to understand the source." He turned his gaze back toward Earth, now rimmed in shadow as the planet rotated. What he saw wasn't panic anymore, it was adaptation. Pockets of fire and movement beyond their control. "Have they begun organizing?" he whispered to himself. Ziltar didn't know yet. But deep beneath the cracked remnants of human civilization, survivors like Reyna weren't just hiding. They were watching, learning, planning. Because Earth had always been a crucible, not of conquest, but of survival. And the survivors were already transforming into something far more dangerous than the invaders had ever imagined. Something the Galactic Assessment Corps hadn't prepared for. Humanity. Ashes and iron. The old world was gone in 6 days. Cities that once pulsed with light and life stood hollow beneath blue domes of alien interference. The energy fields not only jammed communications but bent thought, subtle waves that dulled willpower, fragmented memory, and drained resolve. Humanity was being corralled, not culled. observed like lab rats. But not everyone was under the dome. High in the Colorado Rockies, where the sky was sharp and clear and the aliens' reach thinned, Reyna Cortez stood over a cracked tablet screen displaying scavenged satellite data. The power cells were low, but it was enough to give her a glimpse: alien patrols mapping zones, abducting survivors, dismantling resistance infrastructure. She stared at the grid for a long time, then dragged a blackened finger across it, outlining a cluster of alien markers. "They've got a base here," she muttered, pointing toward a plateau east of Cheyenne. "Research outpost, maybe command. Could be salvage, maybe intel." Across the fire, a bearded man in a battered National Guard jacket grunted. "You want to hit an alien outpost with 10 people and 2 rifles?" Reyna didn't blink. "I want to remind them this isn't over." The man, Sergeant Tyler Boone, looked at her like she was cracked. But he nodded anyway. They all did. Commander Ziltar watched footage of a human child throwing a Molotov cocktail at one of his patrol drones. It was a crude act, ineffective and slow. The drone had incinerated the child and his attackers in seconds. Still, Ziltar's jaw tightened. Why waste energy on retaliation when the species was supposed to be collapsing? "Resistance continues in rural sectors," analyst Wren reported. "Primitive. Inefficient. No coordinated threat." "Incorrect," Ziltar snapped. "The longer they resist, the more they adapt. They're not waiting for rescue, they're evolving in place." He tapped a control and called up another feed. Dozens of humans dragging alien drone husks into a cave network, tearing them apart with tools and bare hands. Improvised weapons were already being fashioned. They were learning fast. Too fast. "They are reassembling our technology," Ziltar muttered, "with no understanding of its design." "They're guessing," Wren said with a scoff. "And getting it right," Ziltar growled. He paced back toward the main display, a slow orbit of Earth, bathed in the eerie glow of containment fields. "We underestimated psychological elasticity. They absorb trauma, then use it as fuel." He paused. "Prepare escalation protocols." 2 days later, under cover of cloud and dark, Reyna's group crept toward the alien outpost. The approach was suicide. No digital gear, no air support, and no real backup. Just makeshift cloaks stitched from thermal insulation, analog compasses, and rifles loaded with armor-piercing rounds salvaged from dead convoys. The outpost loomed ahead, humming with soft blue light. Alien architecture, like glass grown into bone, rose from the ground in elegant arcs. Sentinels floated silently between columns. Reyna crouched behind a tree, raising her binoculars. Her breath was steady. "They think we're beneath their notice," she whispered. Boone checked his watch. "What happens if we're not?" "We make sure they bleed anyway." She nodded once. Then they moved. The assault lasted 27 minutes. 3 were killed in the first charge, vaporized by automated defense beams. The rest pushed through, using smoke, fire, and sheer madness. Boone lobbed a homemade EMP grenade that stunned 2 sentinels just long enough for Reyna to get close and slid into the base with a plasma-cutting torch made from stolen alien parts. They stormed the data core. Inside, the tech pulsed like a living heart. Alien glyphs danced across glass. Reyna didn't understand the language, but she understood a kill switch when she saw one. She ripped out the interface node, stuffed it in a lead-lined case, and shouted, "Out! Now!" They ran through burning wreckage and dying screams. Behind them, the outpost went dark. On the Judicator's eye, alarms blared. "Sector 8 outpost, offline," barked Wren. "Complete signal loss. No survivors." Ziltar's hands twitched. Was it a system fault? No. Human strike team. Armed with modified Class B tech. Uncoordinated, but effective. He stared at the feed, smoke curling from the remains of the outpost, plasma flickering in unnatural hues. He felt something ancient, something foreign press against his chest. Fear. Back in the mountains, Reyna sat by the fire, blood on her hands and soot in her lungs. Boone dropped the sealed alien node beside her. "You think it's worth anything?" he asked. She stared into the fire. "If we can learn from it," she said softly, "then we become something they've never faced before." Boone frowned. "What's that?" She looked up, eyes sharp. Unpredictable. The turning tide. The storm didn't come from the sky. It came from the ground. The Galactic Assessment Corps had planned for violence. Their databanks were filled with projections of panicked crowds, riots, scattered militia. They expected fear. What they didn't expect was coordination. At precisely 0300 UTC, 4 alien relay towers across 3 continents went offline. Hijacked. Exploded. One of them, buried deep in the Swiss Alps, was overtaken by what alien records later described as non-technological units utilizing obsolete combustion tactics. In plain terms, humans with gasoline and grenades. Commander Ziltar stood motionless before the Earth display. Behind him, the command deck was a silent panic, technicians whispering to one another, lights blinking red on every console. Reports flowed in like a rising tide. Outpost 7, compromised. Atmospheric scanner grid, degraded. Field drones, offline in North America, Eastern Europe, Central Africa. And then the line Ziltar had dreaded most. Human communications, analog and encrypted, are re-emerging. Coordinated. How? Analyst Vren hissed. We erased their networks. Ziltar's fingers tightened around the edge of the console. They rebuilt without them. In a bunker beneath the burned skeleton of what used to be St. Louis, Reyna Cortez stood before a map. Strings, pins, and scribbled notes covered it like veins. Her makeshift command center buzzed with quiet focus. Dozens of survivors, former soldiers, engineers, even teenagers, were building something out of the ashes. An army without hierarchy, but not without discipline. Boone pointed to a red marker blinking on a salvaged alien tablet. Recon team just pinged a planetary uplink. Northwest Arkansas. Big, active, unguarded. Reyna studied it, jaw set. They're routing most of their fleet comms through that relay, she said. We take it out, we choke them. Boone exhaled. We've got 30 people. Maybe 40 rounds. Reyna smiled coldly. Then we'll aim carefully. Ziltar watched the uplink feed in real time. From orbit, it looked like a quiet valley, forested, remote, peaceful. Then it erupted. Humans surged from the treeline like fire ants. Mortars crafted from scavenged gas tanks and old mining charges. Rifle fire sparked against drone shields. Explosions bloomed like flowers. The comm relay shook, its core flashing red as systems failed. A single soldier, a woman, rushed the base under covering fire. Her figure blurry in alien optics, moving faster than expected. Tactical. Precise. She vanished into the structure. For minutes later, the uplink went dark. And Earth went quiet. Inside the Judicator's eye, the command deck was chaos. We've lost contact with 2/3 of the drone grid. Orbital network is fragmenting. Our targeting systems are blind. Enough. Ziltar roared, his voice echoing across the steel chamber. All fell silent. He turned slowly toward the galaxy map. Earth spun below, no longer a lab subject. It was a war zone. They aren't collapsing, he said. They're learning too fast. Faster than any other assessed species in the last 10,000 cycles. Vren's eyes flicked with unease. What does that mean? Ziltar looked down, face unreadable. It means the assessment is over. Reyna emerged from the smoldering relay, her arm burned, her side bleeding. But she was smiling. In her hand, a pulsing alien data core, black glass, still warm. Behind her, smoke curled into the night. Boone met her at the edge of the field, coughing through soot. You're insane, he muttered. She held up the core. We've got their language files. Command codes. Navigation data. He stared. You're saying we can talk to them now? I'm saying, she said, teeth gritted, we can answer back. 3 days later, a signal echoed through Earth's stratosphere. Alien in construction. Human in delivery. It hijacked every frequency, every orbital link, every channel the invaders had left. The voice was distorted, but unmistakably human. You wanted a test. We gave you a lesson. Run while you still can. On board the Judicator's eye, silence reigned. Even the youngest analysts knew what had happened. The prey had turned. Ziltar watched Earth recede on the viewscreen as the order to retreat rippled through the fleet. He stared at the blue planet, now shrouded in smoke and flame and defiance. "They were never a test subject," he murmured. Vren turned. "Then what were they?" Ziltar's voice was low, haunted. "Something we woke up too soon." He turned from the screen, the stars ahead cold and distant. "And now we run." Echoes of fire. It wasn't a victory yet. It was a wound. A deep, jagged wound carved into a machine that thought itself invincible. In orbit, the alien fleet drifted in disarray. No shots fired. No formal retreat orders. Just silence, fractured by data losses, system collapses, and a single haunting transmission from Earth's surface, humans speaking in their tongue, spitting defiance through stolen comms. The Judicator's eye was bleeding information. And Commander Ziltar was bleeding something deeper, certainty. "Fleet cohesion down 37%, reported analyst Vren, his voice tight. 10 subvessels out of contact. Earth's magnetic field is interfering with recalibration." "No," Ziltar said coldly. "They're interfering." He stared down at the world below, no longer a subject of study, but a battleground of unpredictability. "They've turned the assessment against us. They're forcing us to react." Vren blinked. "Then what's the next directive?" Ziltar's voice dropped into a low rasp. "We respond like they do." On the ground, the survivors had no illusions. The aliens were still vast. Their ships still floated in orbit like gods staring down from broken clouds. But now humanity had something new, proof. The enemy could be touched, wounded, outthought. In the bunker beneath the Missouri ruins, Reyna stared at the cracked alien data core glowing on the table. Boone hovered nearby, watching her work. "You sure poking that thing isn't gonna cook your brain?" "I'm not poking it," she said, carefully aligning a pair of copper nodes. "I'm translating it." The core pulsed. 4 hours, she'd cross-referenced alien glyphs with fragments of recovered syntax from the relay node. The thing was smart, self-healing, semi-organic, but not immune to pressure. Especially not when its systems were being flooded with questions it didn't expect from a mind it couldn't categorize. The screen on the cobbled-together translator blinked to life. Glyphs shifted, blurred, then morphed. Into English. Protocol override detected. Security compromise. Human entity. Recalibrating interface. Boone leaned in, mouth open. "You broke it." Reyna didn't smile. "I opened it." Above them, in the alien war room, Ziltar stared at an incoming feed, one he hadn't authorized. A message. Broadcast in return. Human signal. But what chilled him wasn't the audacity. It was the content. "We've accessed your mission logs. We know your goal wasn't extermination, but classification. You marked us as unstable, primitive, unworthy of integration. We agree. We are not ready to join your galaxy. We are ready to survive it." The message ended with the image of Earth, not the sanitized scans they used in assessment reports, but raw, wild satellite imagery. Cities broken but rebuilding. People gathering in clusters of fire and steel. Flags burned away and replaced with unity born not from borders, but from common threat. Vren stepped away from the screen. "They know too much." Ziltar's eyes narrowed. "No," he said. "They feel too much." 2 nights later, high above the Pacific, humanity launched its first true counterstrike. It wasn't global. It wasn't even sophisticated. It was a single weather balloon, rigged with a stolen alien transmitter and a charge made from refined satellite debris. They sent it straight into one of the scout frigates as it dipped into low orbit. The explosion didn't destroy the ship, but it blinded it. And that was enough. Across the world, resistance cells began moving under the shadow of that blast, slipping beneath sensor grids, hijacking transports, building new weapons from hybrid tech. The tide had turned, not because Earth was stronger, but because it had stopped breaking. Inside the Judicator's eye, silence returned. Not the calculated stillness of observation, but the silence of uncertainty. Ziltar stood before his officers, their once pristine uniforms now rumpled, datapads cracked. "We came to test their reactions," he said. "We found something else." Vren, pale and exhausted, whispered, "Do we retreat?" Ziltar closed his eyes. "No." He opened them again, brighter, colder. "We observe from a distance. We leave them with the illusion of victory. But we never stop watching. Never stop recording." He turned from the deck. "One day, they will leave that planet. And when they do, we must be ready." Back on Earth, Reyna stood on the roof of a scorched building, watching the sky. Above her, the stars blinked as the fleet began to move, slowly, uncertainly, retreating just beyond reach. Not gone, but wounded. Boone stepped up beside her, the night air cold and metallic. "You think they'll come back?" She nodded. "Of course." Boone frowned. "What do we do then?" Reyna looked up at the stars, eyes unblinking. "Next time," she said, "we won't just survive. We'll hunt."